Hello, beautiful listeners. Now, you know that I often get excited about the amazing guest speakers that we have to join us on this podcast. And today's no different because I am looking at right now, we have got on our potty this week one of my most favorite business women that I have ever met. Michelle, that's you, Michelle Gregory. Now, Michelle, you've heard a little bit about Michelle, but the reason, or one of the reasons we wanted to invite her along today to be able to chat with us and give you and us some really great pearls of wisdom and insights into business is because it's no mean feat. It's not a small thing to have a business celebrating early 20 years, 20 plus years in business. Let's just pause for a moment around that.
Yeah.
Let's just acknowledge that, there's so many stats out there that talk about the success rates of business. Ness and I have been in business going on 9 years, and oh my gosh, the ups and downs and all the things that go along with it. So that's why it was a no-brainer to invite Michelle along. And even just before we clicked record, and we were joking about the great conversations that happened before we hit record, Michelle started to talk about even the life cycles of business versus having children, the life cycles of children. So I'm excited to see where this conversation would go. And Michelle, I'm going to hand over to you. And I think what I'd love to know and what I'd love for you to share with our listeners throughout this conversation is just some insights on the biggest lessons that you've learned or tips that you would say for us relative newbies in comparison to your business experience and success. So even just in that intro, is there anything that kind of came up for you as to where we can start this question? Insights, wisdom, tips. Over to you.
Thanks, Nikki and Ness, and thanks for the invitation to have me on. Do you know what actually came up for me when you said 20 years and you said, let's just have a minute there? I sighed. I sort of deep breath in and because it is that it is a thing to be celebrated and it is a thing to look back on, but also when we look back and we look back at where we started and where we are now, it is something that it really is overwhelming when you try and can contract it into a short space of time, because what I would say is I don't think we ever imagined that we would be quite where we are. So a little bit of a background about our business, I suppose, to start that off. We sell branded merchandise. So we create great merch that connects companies to their people, whether they be internal or external. It amplifies their brand. And if we do it well, we actually think we can do this with an environmental and with a planet in mind. So with a sustainability focus. We're an online business. That was a conscious decision right back at the start. But really when we started, I've heard that Phil Knight from Nike used to talk about, he'd sell the shoes out of the back of his car and one day he would own a real business. They did this on the side to learn, and then one day they would own a real business. And strangely, that's what my husband thought as well when he started the business. I'll just do this. I'll learn a bit about business. We'll do some, and then one day I'll start a real business. And that side hustle, that thing grew and became a real business. And I don't think we can, particularly if we're starting out on our own and we're not, necessarily looking for partnerships and venture capitalists and people that are going to bring a lot to us. And I think some of us, we don't start out thinking that we'll have a team of nearly 35 people between Australia and the Philippines that will, and everything that entails. So that's one of the really big things in that the vision at the start. And when that's why I sigh, when you look back, it's sort of is like, wow, I didn't expect this. Is the first thing I would say, which I suppose comes down to but what I do believe is that you do dream forward. You do dream forward, you do plan forward. And I call it, you put that next mast across the horizon. You can't really see it yet. And you think, so if I take that back to Douglas was very determined that we would have a website.
Mm-hmm.
And this was our website. There's a great thing on the internet called the Wayback Machine. So you can go and put a website address in there and you can see how long Google's been searching it. Our website first comes up on that in around 2005, 2007, somewhere in that window. So we knew Google was important. Well, SEO was just becoming a thing. All of that stuff. It was important to us to have a website. That was the mast across the horizon.
Yep.
And then it's the learning on the way. How are we going to build? It's the incremental little steps of, so we want it to have products on it. What do we want to call those products? How are people going to find us if we do that? And slowly that vision becomes larger and larger and larger and bigger.
As you're talking there, Michelle, it reminds me of this, the great analogy around my brother does long distance walking. So he'll walk from Walhalla in Victoria to Canberra. Takes,
wow.
We're talking very smelly by the end of the trip. You don't want to be in the car picking them up. But I remember for his he had his 40th birthday, he took us all up to Mount Hotham because that's where they often like to stay. They do have an overnighter there. And he took us to this, like a little walk that we went up a hill, which I was huffing and puffing by the end of it, like 30 minutes in. And he just sort of pointed off to the left-hand side and he said, as far as you can see into the distance plus another week, that's Walhalla. And then he pointed off in the other direction and he said, as far as you can see into the distance plus another, I can't remember, 3 weeks, that's Canberra. And I remember almost having a meltdown at the thought of, oh my God, like imagine the blisters and, the uncomfortable sleeping and I don't know how I could do it. And then I had to stop and remind myself, actually, you don't get here, at this point without a lot of preparation, a lot of planning, the vision of where you're going to, but it's the one step after the other. And it got me thinking around something I'd heard early in my business, which is you cannot solve the problem. Like we're trying to solve the problem at year 8 in business when we're year 1 in business. So I can imagine for you, it's that whole, we want to get a website. Oh my God, but I don't even know what hosting platform to put it on. It's like, well, hang on a minute. Let's just bring it right back. Let's just solve the next problem. Let's just take one step on this 6-week journey. And then we will learn and understand what the next step is going to entail. And then the one after that. So the idea of the vision in the future, but my brother and his partner did not just rock up one day with, new runners from Nike going, I'm going to do a 6-week hike. It's all the steps in preparation to get us to where we want to be. We just got to have a sense of direction, right?
Absolutely. I can't agree more with that. And I like to hike as well. Nikki and I have talked about, because she's embarked or is starting to embark on some of that as well. And hiking and particularly hills. I like your hill analogy. Hills are hard and they never get easy. That's the truth in the matter. And it's really, but eventually you do get there, and you do get there one step at a time. And that's exactly the same thing within business. You do get there. It might be messy and hard, and there might be swearing on the way. There might be vomit in the mouth. There might be tantrums. There's all of those things. But you do get to a point, and then you look back and think, wow, I've done it. And I learned a little bit on the way, which you then store. It becomes part of, to carry on that analogy, it goes into the toolkit in the backpack, and you then pull it out for next time. Yep. And it also gives you that confidence to think, and again, the hill analogy, you look then across at the next peak And you think, well, if I've got here, I can probably get to there.
Yeah.
And but here's the tricky part. We like to jump to there. We forget that usually we've got to come down that hill,
Yes.
And if you do hike, and your brother might tell you, coming down a hill is actually harder than going up a hill. So coming down and coming off, and you're thinking, I should be loving this. This should be the easy bit. Why isn't this the easy bit? Coming down that part is hard. And then you sort of go through a bit of that, and then you start to go up again. And same things happen. So it's exactly the same for all of our challenges in business. All of those little things that sort of appear and you do have to take them one part at a time. You can't, you know that one day you'll need people, but there's no point having an employment contract ready for the people that you're going to employ in so many years' time, because the laws change. There's lots of great software and platforms and things out there, but if you're not ready to use them, it's just an expense that you don't need. So it's really I would say that's one of the other things, is be very conscious and intentional in the choices that you make. And that's actually one of the values that we have in our business, is that we communicate and we act with intent. So that means that we've made a decision, and that's what we're going to stand by or act towards. And sometimes that decision is actually not to do anything right now. Let's be clear that, there's not always, should we do X or Y? Sometimes we need to stay where we are at the moment and evaluate for a little bit more. Sometimes a wait is the right decision to make, and I think for a lot of people, to bring up the dreaded COVID again, when COVID first came in to the world, a lot of people, ourselves included, we were looking and we were making decisions and thinking, what do we do here? Do we lay people off? Do we keep people? A serious decision that we actually consciously looked at was what amount of expenditure are we prepared to make to keep the business going? And if it goes beyond that point, we will close. So we evaluated all of that. We had these questions, and then it became, okay, what we need to do now is wait. Let's see how this COVID plays out. And for us, it was one quarter that was really, really difficult. So it happened in the March through April, then the July. Sorry, someone's trying to see me. I can't see that, Dom. I've got a message. It's like, what would you like for lunch? I think it says.
Yeah, well, that's
I'm all good, thank you. You don't need to edit that out.
No. Real conversations, real life. Food's important also.
Yeah. So I think, I think that is an example of where we'd done some planning, but then it was a watch and wait. And then it's like, okay, now we've got new information with some more time. Now we make different decisions. So that's the I think, and that's the important of having the longer term vision. Where do we want to go? Can we do we have to act now? Yeah, but this wait is still a step on that way.
Yes.
and there we go. And it's like we said it, Nikki, you asked last time we were at dinner, what's one of the most important things we've learned, or, over years in business. And I think I said, this too shall pass. Everything, a new decision point comes up. You can't wallow for too long. We get things wrong, but we can't wallow.
Yeah. And there's a real sense of like it's not rushing. Calm may be the right word, it may not be. I'm sure that there's moments where it's not calm, but it's this, I think there's a tendency when we're feeling stressed or worried or anxious about the future, we're trying to solve the problems that haven't even happened yet, that we're creating in our mind. And then there's a panic. And then in the panic, there's decisions that are made that are potentially not great decisions. And even so, it's the power in the pause is what I'm hearing, to be able to stop, to be able to just go, actually, everything in my body may be saying, go, 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 rush, change, but just hold.
Just hold. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We had a completely different example of that the other day. My husband and I we bought a beach house. It's got really narrow stairs in it. And we bought a fridge to put into the beach house, but we, got there and were like, oh my God, this is going to be a logistical nightmare to get this thing up here. So we left it. We left it sit on the floor overnight. The next morning we got up, we looked at it, we measured, and my husband is very much, as he always says, get rubber on the road. He's a rubber on the road type of person, which is a great driver within business. And I'm more deliberative. I'm more, let's look at this. So, another analogy would be IKEA furniture. He's tip it out and start build. Can we have a look and make sure we've got everything? Can we read the instructions? He's meanwhile wanting to shoot me. I'm wanting to shoot him because this is going on. And then if we were to have a competition, chances are we'd finish at about the same time.
Yeah.
Doing these things. So, and back to the fridge story, what we did was we looked at it a bit more in the morning. We had a bit of a hum and ha. Then we went for a walk on the beach. Then we, had breakfast. Then we came home. Then we were like, I think this is what we need to do.
Yes.
Without a hitch, more remarkably, without a fight.
Wow.
And, so that's another example of sometimes you slow down to speed up, to get through. Yeah.
Yes. And even if we bring also just side note, I can't believe you brought a long distance walking, aka hiking analogy to this conversation, because Michelle and I have had many conversations around this. So that was like, wow, amazing. The other way I look at that as well is thinking, you can look at that next peak and we don't know what the ground is going to be like. We don't know the storms that we'll have to weather. We won't know there's going to be times where you do have to push a little harder, or knowing when to pull back or when to hold and take cover. And sometimes we get it wrong, and that's okay. And it's not about that, because that's going to happen. Let's face it. Like, it's going to happen. How do we respond to that?
Absolutely.
So I would love to know then, with this in mind, with this knowing when to push, when to pull back, the power of the pause. I love that you went for a beach walk. The fridge analogy is so perfect. How do you know? What's your thoughts around, or insights around, how do you intuitively, or is it intuitively know? How do we know when to push, and how do we know when to pause?
It's really interesting, because sometimes there is an instinct in it, but one of the best ways that I like to look at it too is, if we look at a decision and it's not pros and cons, well, it is. It's, what are the outcomes here, positive and negative? And if we make that decision, this is what could happen. If we make another decision, this is what could happen. And it really comes down to, there's going to be some downside. There usually is some downside for most things. And it's about saying then, am I prepared to accept that downside? Which downside do I want to accept more? Or is this upside more than compensates for that downside? And then once we're comfortable with that, it's like, okay, we've got everything in a row. It's time to move. We have to do something. So different, to go on another, I like to tell lots of stories. When we decided a number of years back to move overseas for 12 months, it was 2016. We decided in 2015, or we had this silly idea, what would happen if we wanted to go and live overseas? We think we might do it. And then, of course, the brain says, no, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. You've got a business, you've got kids, you've got, all of it. It starts to list the things. And so what we did with that was we said, okay, what's smart to do here is to find the absolute, we agree it's a silly idea. You don't take your kids out of school and leave your business for 12 months. That's absolutely ridiculous. So let's go and find the big roadblock that's going to stop us, because at some point later, we're going to look back and say, I wonder if we'd done that. And if we can say, do you know what, it wasn't possible because we couldn't get a visa, or we couldn't run the business, or we couldn't get the kids into whatever it was going to be. Once we found that big roadblock that was insurmountable, we could say, excellent, we don't need to do it. Well, every potential roadblock fell away. And so then you're left with, you have to do, you've put this, you have to do this now. Or you don't, but be prepared to live with the wondering. So in our case, we did it. So that tends to be a lot of how we will work things. And we are, so, and I'll talk for Douglas and I quite a lot because he's quite, if we use our Gallup strengths here. So Douglas is strategic and futuristic. His top two. Communication is one of his as well. Empathy is also one of his. Discipline is one of his. So you can see he will see something, the idea, I'll have a business, I'll have a website. He's got the discipline to do the work. He's also able to develop a strategy to do that. Whereas mine, I see connections in things. I'm deliberative, so I assess the risk more likely, as around things. I also have relator, so that means I would prefer to have fewer deeper relationships. So I won't walk into a party and meet everybody. Just not going to happen. I will meet maybe one or two people and try and strengthen those relationships, which I think is good for building team and having people here. I also have maximizer, and maximizer is I look at, say, Douglas might have a strategic futuristic idea, and I'll say, do you know what, if we add this, that'll make it brilliant. So that's, another one of mine, and mine's also responsibility. So if I accept that it's my role to do something, that's where I take ownership, and then I do it. So we each use our strengths as well to try and choose and get things done.
What I love about that is, the ability to understand the strengths, and rather than looking at the gaps, rather than trying to be something you're not, it's about stopping, reflecting, and saying, how can we work together in order to get the best out of both of us? And I see that so often with, business owners and teams that we work with, the amount of owners of businesses that perhaps haven't like any kind of profiling, whether it be the Strengths Finder, whether it be DISC, whether it be MBTI, there's so many out there, but understand what drives you, what makes you tick, and how you contribute to the business. And in that, for you running your business, if Douglas was not in it, how would you bring in those skill sets in order to be able to make that balance work really, really well? Like Nikki and I, complete opposite in DISC profiling.
Yep.
We bring different strengths to the business. So that was one thing that I would love business owners to be taking away from this conversation. What do I understand about what makes me tick, and how can I play to my strengths? And the other thing that came up, Michelle, when you were talking, was this whole concept of slowing down, going on the beach walk, having lunch, whatever it is, it's stepping away from. Because from what you're saying, the clarity comes from being out of the business, from being away from just getting out of the weeds of it, in order to be able to make those decisions and analyze and, work out the strategy and all of that kind of thing. And I just see many leaders and business owners getting sucked into the vortex of the daily. You know, the next step, or that big mountain over there, and the one over there that I've got to go and climb, and the this and the that, and not realizing actually, you know, coming back around to what my brother does, they do weeks of preparation in the lead up to their walks. They go and do food drops in advance, knowing that they're going to be somewhere in 6 weeks' time. They're prepping, or they're buying the best gear that's lighter and lighter every walk they go on. So the time they spend in getting ready to do a really big walk like that is just as important as the time on the walk.
Absolutely. And also the recovery time afterwards.
Yes.
So that comes to the evaluation, the evaluation piece. The other thing I would say about strengths is it's also knowing your strengths and what you bring, but it's also knowing sometimes how those strengths can be challenging for other people. You know, and knowing, so if I use my ones again as an example that maximize a part, one of the things that I need to be conscious of is someone will come to me and say, hey, I've got an idea, and maybe all they want from me is excellent, well done. You know, I'm very hard. I was just about to say, have you thought about XYZ? Brought in the deliberative, and you know, have you, you know, and could you do? It's using that. All they want is, you know, excellent. You know, that's a great idea. They don't want my, have you thought about all the other options? Could you do it better? Sometimes it's just an acknowledgement, you know, and it can make people feel, even though I'm thinking, oh, that's lovely and positive to give that feedback and ask them if they've thought this and if they've that, they're walking away thinking, oh, I thought that, you know, I just wanted something different from you. So it's also being aware of the other sides and what that can be received as for other people is a big important one, I think. Yeah,
that impact on people. Now I have to close the loop on the story you were talking about as well, about living overseas for 12 months. So all the roadblocks were removed, and even like there's so much in that, just that first roadblock, focus on that one thing, and then you kind of get the answer as to whether is this the right thing or not for you. So fill us in. You went overseas. You lived in Spain, 12 months?
Yeah, 12 months. We lived in Granada in the south of Spain for 12 months. I homeschooled. I didn't. I'm shaking my head with very loose use. You know, so with the children, you know, were out of school. We travelled around. We were able to communicate as much as we could. In terms of we weren't thirsty and we didn't go without meals. We could order food and drink and enough to be understood. We had lovely friends. We traveled, we experienced, we really enjoyed that. You know, the business at that particular time, Douglas did 2 trips back to Australia to check in. We probably did about 8 hours a week between us remotely, checking in and keeping things going. The business grew. In that particular space of time, we went with the philosophy, and as I talked to the team, I just said to them, you know, this is, and we talked about them talked to the team about it in the really early planning phases as well, of just, this is an idea, we think we're going to do it. So as they knew it was coming for more than 6 months before it actually happened, but we did also just say to them, you can't break this. It's set up in a way that you can't break it. Make the best decisions you know how to make, and we'll evaluate afterwards. So this is the recovery. We'll evaluate afterwards, and if we learn in the evaluation that something could be different, well, we'll do it different next time. It's not about punishment for a bad mistake. You've done the best you know. So we were away the full 12 months, just over, and then came back. I think it was brilliant for us. I think it was good for the team that were here at the time. You know, it gives them some autonomy and authority, and they learn that they can do things. And going back to the slow down, speed up sort of making decisions analogy, if they had a question or something and they had to send it through to us on email or whatever, because of the time difference, we didn't talk every day. Sometimes that meant that people made decisions, or they didn't. They'd slowed down, and it turned out that what was a big issue, yesterday afternoon is not a big issue today, or those types of things. So it was a brilliant experience. Really glad that that we've done it. I think it was great from a family perspective, in terms of we didn't know anybody, we didn't speak the language, so we had to become a strong gang unit from that perspective, which then also translated into the business for the group that were here working. They had to become that strong unit, working together for that. And then, and I think it's a good part. It's a good part of the evolution of our family and our business. Yeah.
Amazing.
Sounds like, and it had a really positive effect. So something, or impact on the business and your life, and something that seemed like, I can't remember verbatim what you said, a crazy idea or a silly idea or something, it actually turned out to be something really quite momentous for the business by the sounds of it, and for your personal.
Absolutely. Well, it was after that. So we'd been in business, 2016. So we're talking about 14, 15, 16 years thereabouts at that point. It was at the end of that year, 2016, that we decided to write a business plan. Yeah. Our first one.
Wow.
Our first one. Proper one.
And you do continue to do that now, don't you? Yes, that is something that's stuck.
Look, that is absolutely, well, what I will say is a more thorough business plan.
Yes.
Whereas previously what we'd done is, I remember one time right early, and it was just Douglas and myself and maybe one other, and we thought, things are slowing down. We're not sure where the world's at. I'm just trying to think. And we thought, okay, so what we worked out then was the amount we needed to sell to cover our costs. This was our break-even point. And then we were like, oh, we can break even at that. Excellent. That's good. And I remember saying to Doug at the time, because we know we can do that, I don't want this to be a self-limiting prophecy now. We've got to put that in a drawer. We know we can do it, so now let's just go and do it and see where we come. So there's that other part, I think, of planning. Sometimes we write things down, and it's amazing to look back and say, look, we've ticked all of these things off. But sometimes if you tick them off ahead of time, or you're doing better, that doesn't mean that this is the place that we stop and stay either. You don't want to limit it there. You want to say, where do we go on? So we did have plans before, but nothing that was a really sort of
like a grown-up plan.
Yeah, not a grown-up plan. No.
Amazing. I feel like we could chat all day. You're just sharing some wonderful stories, and really, really helping, well, for me anyway, align that into looking at business as a long-term, and reminding myself that sometimes you get stuck in the weeds of it, and remember that, this too shall pass, and things, just look at it from a different perspective, step back. So I think my wrap-up question for you, to help with our listeners today to do something actionable within the next 24 hours, we love to give that takeaway for them. If someone is listening and feeling like quite inspired by what you're talking about, but still feels stuck in the weeds, like, how do I slow down to speed up? What would be something practical and tangible that you would say that they could actually do, even if they're feeling like it feels like too big and impossible to sort of have that luxury of going to the beach for a walk? What would be some mindset shift or just a practicality that they could do in the next 24 hours, Michelle?
That's really interesting. The thing that comes to mind, and it was a real shift changer for me too, was to not think about the business in terms of even we're a family business, even just myself and Douglas and now. And even to think, oh, well, one day, in estate planning, our kids will inherit X, Y, Z. This is not an inheritance. This is the potential for opportunity and intergenerational opportunity. So it's that, what's the opportunities here for me? So what are the opportunities in this moment, in this question, in this decision, in this challenge? And think of them, and think of them beyond now. With that knowledge that you will come through. And I would say then look at that, am I prepared for what are the consequences I'm prepared to accept?
Yeah. I love that so much. What are the opportunities out of this situation? And once you've landed on that, what is it that I'm prepared to accept? Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I know Nikki wants to say thank you and all of that kind of stuff. So I'll throw to you, Nick, before we wrap up.
Yes, of course I have to, because again, you do have a real gift of storytelling, and then within there's like we opened these pearls of wisdom and insights. I mean, even at the very beginning when you said to dream forward, plan it forward, and that's that balance of knowing where you want to go, but not over planning it, or which can help you feel stuck. I mean, honestly, I can't wait to listen back. There's just so many great insights, and I can't wait for our next conversation, because luckily we get to just talk to you all the time. So
wow, we've got lunch tomorrow.
So I can't wait to continue this conversation then. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know that if you're listening, you would have taken so much value. So I encourage you also to listen back to this one again, get your notebooks out, or think about what's the one thing that I really take from here. And you've got your action. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next week.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.